Hey guys, Rob and George here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe with episode 3, Tell It to the Frogs. That really kind of goes to something that begins to unravel quite quickly between Laurie and Shane, which we will touch upon, of course. November 14th, 2010, of course, this episode drops and really serves as a nice third piece to what we've already experienced in the first 2 episodes. Gwyneth, new director, Gwyneth Horder-Payton is our director for this episode. You may not know her. She 7 episodes in American Horror Story. I should have looked up what season. I had thought about actually checking one out, but I got the impression they weren't separate stories, but a continuation of a drawn-out story. And so, I don't know, I didn't just want to jump right into the middle. I could have anyways, just to kind of get a flavor of her directing. But she worked second unit, sort of surprisingly, maybe not, for Oliver Stone on The Doors. I was kind of at that. And then, oh yeah, Raising Cain, second unit, Raising Cain. Tons of TV. But some genre work with American Horror Story. So there you go. Frank Darabont still on the writing, but contributing also Charles Eglee and Jack LoGiudice. That's how you say it. So some contributing writers with Frank on this. A phenomenal guest appearance. Well, entrance, of course. The great Daryl Dixon comes in here. This is great, man. There's a lot of great stuff. Now, in terms of Norman Reedus, I could not remember, as I looked at his filmography, I was astounded to see things like Mimic. I just don't remember him in that movie. Really ought to probably revisit that Guillermo del Toro film. 8mm. I don't remember him in that either. Blade 2, I sort of maybe kind of remember him in that. Then this is the one I should have went back and revisited because it's much shorter in length. But John Carpenter's Cigarette Burns, Masters of Horror, and Pandorum. I don't remember him in that one either. Yeah, so much for Norman Reedus just being sort of, characterized simply by his Daryl Dixon character, but what a phenomenal job. And it's going to be fun just watching his character evolve over the many shows. It's already been said, some of the critiques that will come probably pretty quickly is seemingly the overemphasis of too much character building, not enough zombies, and when really this is, but man, if every episode, I'll just say this, if every episode was as good as episode 3, I don't know if I would have minded it that much. This had some great, powerful opportunities for character. And we'll get into that. So where episode 1, felt like a nice little callback to 28 Days Later in terms of how our protagonist, our hero, wakes up, and again, also go back to Day of the Triffids, but wakes up in bed to the catastrophe that has ensued. This episode is a little bit of a callback in an interesting way to 28 weeks later, the follow-up to the first film, which, by the way, if you've heard the news, Cillian Murphy and others, they've all Danny Boyle all getting back together for a third piece to this, and that ought to be very, very interesting. But a callback to this in the sense that, okay, so help me not to forget that. I want to tie that in here. So this episode, we knew this was coming. So we've escaped Atlanta, or at least the inner city. We're making our way out to the camp. Of course, Rick has absolutely no clue, and those around him have no clue what is in store for them. And this episode, man, and this episode may run a little long, which my apologies. I'm just think there's so much going on in this thing. I'll try to go pick up the pace here real quick here, but that's probably, well, Merle is the first thing I gotta mention. We get to see Merle in the opening moments of the episode, and he's going, from, the tension is between crying out to God for forgiveness in hopes of a miracle, and then very quickly and violently turning seemingly against the same God as he finally sees his solution before him. And I don't know, I kind of think to myself, perhaps that was God's solution, his atonement for just his severe character flaws. I'm going to get you out of the situation, but it's not going to be without some loss or sacrifice. And of course, it's his hand, right? And we'll see this when others will show up there to rescue him. That's all that's left. And we don't see this unfold. We kind of get the idea something is coming, but we'll get it towards the end of the episode. And we'll also find out that the chains that were put up to keep the zombies from getting through the door hold. And so even though these zombies are trying to squeeze through the small gap, it sends Merle just off the absolute psychological deep end, man. And he just goes bonkers. And so, I mean, it's interesting. It really is an interesting. And my understanding is some of the injuries we see on his head is from him pounding himself really deeply into character, himself into the floor of the roof there. They say in the director commentary, and I think Shane and Rick were part of that. Might have been someone. I think it was just Rick and Shane and the director maybe. But he put on a show in terms of acting. I say you want to see him put some acting chops on, go back to Henry Portsmouth Serial Killer, if you have a tough stomach, strong stomach for that. But he is, man. This dude knows how to get into character. And when we get our intro or entrance or introduction with Jeryl, he really plays off of him as his brother. He might be a little bit more reasonable, and we'll get into. I hope I can touch on everything I remember from this episode. But so we move from Merle and that closing out into the credits and then into the show, and of course they arrive in camp, and it is the reunion unfolds, man. Rick, I think Shane is the first to see him, and he can't. I'm telling you, everybody in this scene brought their A game. This is one of the great moments in TV I have seen in a long time. They really brought it, man. Shane is the first, though. But then Carl sees his dad and almost can't believe it. And just the expression on his face, which, Laurie then follows his gaze and sees, and she can't believe. And I almost want to say at that moment she happens to glance at Shane, because something else is gonna be revealed, that apparently he had told her Rick was dead. Now, in what context? I don't know if he deliberately. I don't know if he deliberately tried to put on a lie in order to assume the role as husband and father in that relationship, or he truly did believe. That stuff may be revealed a little bit later on, and as you listen to me, you may be laughing, saying, "Oh yeah, because you know what's coming." I don't remember. I have no clue. I'm just going on this particular episode and what I'm seeing unfold. And that, so we see that, and that whole reunion is so beautiful. That leads into. And remember, just that morning, Laurie and Shane were together. They had that little rendezvous out there in the woods. So, that rendezvous and how we see that portrayed, and how we see her and Rick's reunion later on, really is wonderfully laid out in the difference between two that are drawn together for a lot of different reasons, other than what her and Rick are drawn together. But this creates a massive problem, right? I mean, it's the drama of the show, right? This helps move us and keeps us on edge in terms of where this is going to go. And you see in that campfire also, you see Shane is a preface to what will come a little bit later. He does not know how to process this in terms of what does this mean, him and Laurie, him and Carl, and the relationships he's been building, and the time that he has taken to protect those two. And it sort of builds up, and he gets a minor way of release when Ed throws a heavy log on the fire, and Shane is able to sort of vent, but in that direction without sort of giving anything away. Although I would imagine Laurie probably senses it. But that is a preface to what will happen between him and Ed later on, which is how Shane, at least temporarily, absolves a lot of his built-up emotion, right? As a lack of a better word there, man. So the campfire scene, you have Daryl's entrance. Is Daryl's entrance? Yeah, I think, Daryl's entrance comes. And the kids come screaming out of the woods. This is the morning. Rick and others go run to ascertain the meaning. Of course, we find a zombie feasting on a deer that we also learn very shortly. It's a deer that Daryl's been tracking. And of course, you can't eat anything a zombie's been mauling on, right? But the zombie they're mauling on the deer is Greg Nicotero, man. So great cameo for him, showing off his work in prosthetics, makeup, special effects. And just not that, but he actually plays off that scene really well, because this isn't a simple, well, just shoot him in the head because you want to limit noise. They basically just, and you kind of get a comedic version of this in Shaun of the Dead, but they just take turns beating on this thing until finally, who is it? What's his name there will actually take an axe and chop his head off, which is great. But so you get Daryl's entrance, which is great. It's phenomenal. And then you get this underlining tension. You know what's coming. They're going to have to tell him, right? They're going to have to tell him. I'm trying to, I don't want to forget about the 28 weeks later thing. So keep mentally throwing that at me. So Rick confronts him. In the only way you can with Daryl. He's a man that will listen to plain honesty. He may not like it, but he'll listen, and he knows honesty. And Rick lays it out plain. Dude, your brother was a threat, and I handcuffed him. And while I may regret it, it is what it is. And in fact, Shane follows it up with, oh, this made me laugh so hard. Daryl calls him a douchebag. or Shane calls Merle a douchebag, and Daryl's like, dude, it's my brother. He goes, no, you didn't really mean that, or something like that. And Shane goes, oh no, I meant that. He's a douchebag. And he was just, how he delivers the line is great. And so, Rick comes to the point of, we got to go back and get him. I cannot, in good conscience, leave that man. I don't care how bad his character flaws are. I can't leave him in good conscience. This wins probably a lot of respect with Daryl, I would imagine. And, if it's, and I'm sure with Shane, but Shane is also dealing with what's more important here, the douchebag up on the rooftop or the greater number of people they've been trying to protect. Well, Shane says, throw me a bone, at least throw me a bone. Well, the bone ends up being the bag of guns. Okay. Shane can agree to that. That's important. That's necessity. And since it's right there in vicinity, you get Merle if you can get Merle, and maybe you can repair, Daryl, right? And so that is a major point of heading towards the end. So they leave and they go, and might as well knock this one out of the way, because there's so many major moments. I doubt every episode has this many in there. But when Shane unleashes on Ed, Ed is just, man, he is not a very sympathetic character. He probably abuses his wife. He may even abuse his daughter. at least verbally, maybe physically, in the sense of maybe not in a sexual way, at least I hope not, but nonetheless, he abuses. He is not a sympathetic character at all. And when he starts down at the reservoir, starts getting all over them for, their little comedy session, in which Andrea, man, I love how she just stands up to him. He knows he's limited by what he can do to the other women in the group, and so he's so angry. And this really is a great episode about how sometimes we build up that emotion and we look to vent, and so we look in another direction. And so while he seeks to vent on his wife for how he's being made to, well, say how he's being made to feel, but like we're sorry for him, right? Shane is dealing with Laurie having just told him, we're done. We are done. Rick is back. We are done, and you just got to deal with it. And so all of that is just building up inside. And as he watches Laurie and Carl start to walk out, remember, tell it to the frogs. He's down there trying to show them how to catch frogs. He sees all this happening on the other side. And the minute he sees Ed, man, it's like he stands there watching. Do it, so I can have my release. And the minute Ed strikes his wife, man, Shane is on it, man. And you do not feel it. You can't really. It's the scene ultimately ends in such a way as you own. It's not that you feel sorry for him. You feel sorry for the situation, for his wife, and for what is there. But man, does Shane put a number on him, and man, beats him to a pulp. You almost think he's gonna kill him, and then he just tells him, "You touch your wife again, you touch your daughter, or any other woman in this group, I will kill you." I'm pretty sure that's what he says. That's pretty evident. And this guy, man, is beaten to a pulp, man, and he is in fear, man. He knows he is dealing with one of a couple alpha dogs in this group. Daryl being the other, Rick being the other. Those are maybe the three prominent alpha dogs in this group. And Shane, at least for the moment, can really get that release off of himself. So then, you go back to this, right? You go back to the idea where, Laurie says, "You told me he was dead." If you remember, the whole reason the contagion reignites as a result of Don, the dad, tells his kids that mom had died when she did not die. He was a coward and left her. And that scene is a little bit complicated, but I mean, in the end, he does just abandon her. And he just assumes she's dead. And when she shows up and he's forced to reconcile with his kids, and then he goes to seek forgiveness for her, which he's not even supposed to have contact because she's under tight medical watch, but she ends up being a carrier. So even though she doesn't show the signs of being infected, she's a carrier, right? And when he kisses her and the infection begins, that lie begins to undo everything that had been built up to that moment. And so you got this instance here. It reminded me how much, how they sort of kind of perhaps looked at that. Interesting. I can't remember how far-reaching this lie ends up being to the overall arc of the story. But it'll be interesting to travel there. And then very quick, I see where my time is. We get back in there, and Glenn, again, just showcases his talent in terms of allocating resources, in terms of personnel, and who is going to do what. And he really does, and is a great moment. It's almost a callback to the Dawn of the Dead remake. And I think it's in this episode, maybe it's an earlier one, where he's asked, what did you do before this? And God, what was it he did? It was like, what's his name from Dawn of the Dead remake? He was just a TV sales guy. Glenn didn't really do much. But see, there again, man, most leadership seen in, say, World War II on the beaches of Normandy, a lot of leadership came from, privates who were suddenly didn't have officers around, and you just saw leadership born in the heat of combat. And that's what you have here in these situations. You see leadership is born out of circumstance. And Glenn brings certain attributes that perhaps he never realized he quite had. Maybe he did, but he brings them to the table in a way that Rick understands. They've got a special player on their team with Glenn, and he's got something special with Daryl in the sense that Daryl is fearless, man, and he's probably more reasonable than moral. But we got a problem, and I'm going to close this out. We get to the end of the episode. We get to the end where they finally made their way. It's the guns, right? It's go get Merle. They got to go up to the top of the roof. The chains have held. They unlock. They get out there. No Merle. Hand severed with a hacksaw. And we're left there. And the great framing shot is the handcuff hanging from the pipe. And that's the last framing shot we get, is just the handcuff there. And that is a great way to end the third episode. A lot that you could have unpacked in this episode. And I think I've just kind of hit things quick. But some interesting things. So we'll leave it there and make ready for, we only got a few more episodes and we're out of season 1 already. I mean, it's only 6 episodes. So the next one deals with getting out of Atlanta once again. And then the last final episodes to carry us out of season 1. So as always, go Dogs!
It might be useful to